Hello, everyone, and welcome into this episode of the Irish NFL Show with me, Colum Cronin, and joined by a good friend of the show at this point. He's been on a number of times. Mike Herndon, how are you doing, sir?
Doing great, doing great. Yeah, it's good to be talking football again with you.
Yeah, it's I mean, look, it's never dull in the NFL, and we're obviously going to get into the new HC hire. Before that, like let's go back, I suppose, in terms of the Vrabel you know, firing, I guess, ultimately.
Yeah.
Um, did it come as a big surprise to you firstly?
Um, I I don't know that it was like a shock necessarily because I think people had begun to discuss that possibility around here just simply because the losing had started to pile up. You had the 7-game losing streak to end 2022, and then the team obviously went 6-11 this year. So you add that up, and that's 6 wins in your last 24 football games, and that kind of sustained losing is tough for any coach to endure, no matter what kind of skins they have on the wall from previous seasons. And I did think that Vrabel would ultimately get another year to kind of right the ship because, frankly, I felt like when the Titans fired John Robinson during the 2022 season, that was an admission that they understood that the roster was the main problem with this team, and that Vrabel, if given a strong enough roster like he was in 2019 and 2020 and 2021, could produce very good results on the field, even with a quarterback, like Ryan Tannehill, who nobody's going to confuse with Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or any of these superstar level guys. So I ultimately thought he would get another year. And was a little surprised that he didn't, but not completely shocked just because of the way that the last 2 seasons had kind of gone.
Uh, I have to, I suppose, ask. I mean, in the wake of the firing, there was the story that came out from Dana Rossini and Joe Rexrode in the Athletic that, at least from the outside, would give some concerns. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
lines in that around the way in which the his relationship with ownership and the fact that, despite the win and going for the 2 points, some people weren't happy with that. um Look, lots of things are said in the wake of hirings and firings. We'll get into that, but does that should that give, Titans fans any kind of pause for concern?
To me, it does, because I do think from that piece, it sounds like a lot of ultimate uh, the ultimate cause of Vrabel's firing was not even as much the losing as it was personal issues between himself and Rand Carthon, between himself and Amy Adams Strunk. Um, and I'm torn on the whole thing because part of it does sound like Vrabel last offseason, when John Robinson was fired, wanted more control of the roster, and I get why he would want that. He came up under Bill Belichick as a player who obviously had roster control in New England. He coached under Bill O'Brien, who ended up getting roster control in Houston. Urban Meyer in college, who was a dictator at the college level. So that's the setup that he's used to, and that he kind of feels as normal. And also, he's a guy that just went through a situation where John Robinson traded his best player in the draft the previous year with AJ Brown. And clearly, like, you don't have to be a body language expert to see that Vrabel was not happy about that trade when it was announced. We all have seen the video of him in the war room, getting up and walking away from the table and clearly in distress over that trade. I think he wanted to make sure that he was not going to be put in that position again, where he was, having a player that he valued to a very high degree just pulled out from under him over, some, financial, disagreements or contract negotiation tactics. So to me, I understand Vrabel's motivation. I also understand Amy Adams-Strunk not wanting to give Vrabel full power because that setup has not worked that well. I mean, even you look at Bill Belichick, I think that was part of his downfall in New England, was having full roster control and not having a GM who could balance him out and help him, find the right groceries, to be able to build that roster in New England with. So I just think I understand it from both sides, but it does sound like ultimately there were some petty grudges held over Vrabel being in New England for the Hall of Fame ceremony and what he said there. And then that wasn't necessarily discussed, but it was something that was harbored within ownership with the Titans. It's disappointing that a lot of that stuff got in the way of what should have been a very good working relationship between Vrabel and Amy Adams-Strunk and all the powers that be in Nashville. Because I still think Vrabel's a very good football coach. Does he have his faults? Yes, absolutely he does. I think he's, a little conservative at times. I think he's a little stubborn at times. I think maybe he does have a little bit of an ego with him, but at the end of the day, he got results out of a team that really wasn't we're not talking about like an all-star roster for the Titans in 2021 when they were the 1 seed and, a Ryan Tannehill interception away from potentially going to the Super Bowl that year. So I just think he's a good coach with some flaws, and it's disappointing that some of the off the field stuff got in the way of what had been a good relationship here in Tennessee.
Yeah, no, I would concur. I would say most head coaches and most successful head coaches tend to be egotists, tend to like power, and tend to maybe not to be the most well-adjusted individuals. But be that as it may, it is the dawn of a new era for the Titans. The initial kind of thoughts and response to the Callahan appointment.
I would say it's overwhelmingly positive in Tennessee. Part of that is Callahan is, the tendency is always to hire the opposite of what you just had, right? So Vrabel was a defensive head coach, very, maybe a little bit resistant to analytics. Although, as you mentioned, the 2-point call against the Dolphins, I thought was the right call. I think analytics generally consider that to be the right call. I'm a little alarmed that someone in the Titans building was upset by that. But regardless, setting that aside, I think Callahan is a little bit more analytically inclined. He's obviously an offensive guy. He comes from a team who has thrown the ball on early downs in neutral situations more than any other team in the NFL over the last 2 years. The Titans are in the bottom 3 in the league in that category. So I think Titans fans have long wanted. I mean, we're still talking about a franchise that since they moved to Nashville, which has been, 25 years ago now, over 25 years ago, they have not had a single 4,000-yard passer come through. Ryan Tannehill in his season in 2021 is the single season in a Titans uniform. Now, Warren Moon, obviously, in the Oilers, in Houston, had huge numbers, but in a Titans uniform, Ryan Tannehill's 2021 season is the best passing season that we've seen in Nashville, and I think he threw for like 3,800 yards that year. This franchise, this fan base is starving for an aggressive passing offense. They are starving for a modern NFL offense here. And I think the hope is that Callahan can bring that. And based on his track record, certainly he would project to have that kind of setup. And I think that's a big part of why he was very clearly the primary target for the Titans from the jump. Like, I think he is the guy that was circled at the top of their list. And as they went through the interview process, it only reconfirmed their, initial biases. And he very quickly became the guy. I mean, it was a pretty quick search considering, they fired Vrabel, I think, 2 weeks ago today. So it was a pretty quick search, and I think they landed on the guy that they wanted all along.
So, just as we're talking, Rappaport has tweeted, and maybe this, but you'll have a better insight into this than I would in the inner structure. That the restructure of the front office, Carthon is now executive VP GM, and Chad Brinker has been promoted to president of football operations. Was that expected? Will that have kind of any real impact, Mike?
Yeah, so I did understand that was coming. Now, it I don't think it was necessarily expected. Now, this is a reorganization, and some of the talk, I guess, behind the scenes with the Titans over the last, at least the last few months here is kind of Carthon and Vrabel's relationship has come under scrutiny, and some of that discussion has happened. Some of the talk in Nashville has been that Vrabel did not feel that Carthon was necessarily ready for all of the responsibilities that a general manager has, which was part of, I think, why Vrabel wanted some of those responsibilities to himself. I think this is the Titans taking some of that off of some of the stuff that is outside of building the roster and really managing the coaching staff off of Carthon's plate. So Carthon is going to be in charge. Brian Callahan is going to report to Carthon. So Carthon is going to be in control of this organization. Carthon is going to have full control over the roster, the draft, free agency, player acquisition, all of that stuff. Brinker is going to handle salary cap, some of the other operations, things like the grounds, analytics department is going to be Brinker's, which analytics was already kind of his baby anyway. So I think they're just splitting that off and making that to where that kind of doesn't have to be necessarily on Carthon's plate, and give Carthon more room to focus on making sure the roster is as competitive as possible, and then making sure that the play on the field matches with the vision that they're trying to build here.
I suppose just to go back to the head coach and what he might do. Obviously, an awful lot of speculation around whether his dad is going to come and join him there. The Browns made a lot of moves in terms of moving on from some of their offensive coaches, but notably, they didn't move on from their O-line coach. And look, that's something. When you get a good one, they tend to stick around. The Eagles, I mean, is possibly the prime example. I think Stoutland, is he on his third, fourth, perhaps even fifth head coach there? He's there more than a decade at this point. Do you are there any indications as yet, or how quickly is that likely to get resolved in terms of does he get to join his son in Tennessee?
I think we'll probably find that out pretty quickly. And it'll be an interesting situation because you're right. Like when you get one of the great offensive line coaches, and Callahan is one of the, probably two or three best at doing it in the league over the last 20 years. You hold on to those guys because they're extremely valuable. You listen to guys like Mitchell Schwartz, a guy like Brandon Thorne, who I really respect his opinions on offensive line play. And they will tell you how much coaching really can matter at that position group. And it's a group that has to work together cohesively. It's a group that you can, and we've seen it in Nashville too. Like you think back to the Mike Munchak years early in this franchise's run in Nashville. Mike Munchak was a fantastic offensive line coach. And he was regularly taking guys that were not premium draft picks and turning them into Pro Bowl type offensive linemen. The Titans always had a strong offensive line here during those years, and it was just never an issue. So when you get one of those guys, you hold on to them. I think the Browns, it's a complicated question with it being a father-son situation, and obviously, they have both talked about they want to coach together at some point. It has never happened. Brian Callahan has never been on the same staff as his father in his 15 years of coaching in the NFL now. And the older Callahan is getting older, right? Like he's getting close to 70 years old. I think he's 67, if I recall correctly right now. So he may not have too many years left. So I would imagine having his final years here be with his son in Nashville would be a pretty cool setup for them. And obviously would give the Titans something that they desperately need, which is a top flight offensive line coach to rebuild one of the worst units, if not the worst unit in the entire NFL. So I think it's a huge deal if they can get Bill Callahan to come over. Now, the Browns don't have to let him go, I don't believe, unless there's some sort of clause in his contract about coaching with his son, which it's possible that they had the foresight to put that in there. But we don't know any of that right now. So it'll be interesting to see that play out over the coming days. But that's certainly, I think, the biggest question that most Titans fans are kind of waiting to see answered, even more so than like defensive coordinator and offensive coordinator, is will they be able to bring Bill Callahan over? And then if not, will Mike Munchak possibly come back to serve as offensive line coach? Because he's recently told PaulKoharski.com that he is open to returning to coaching now after a couple years of health-related time away from the game, and would be open specifically to returning to Nashville, where obviously he has deep roots with this franchise as both a player and a coach. So the offensive line coach position will be of hot interest in Tennessee over the next week or so as Callahan starts to build out his staff.
And I suppose then just kind of finally, Mike's conscious of your time, in terms of Will Levis and what the Titans feel they have, is the feeling in the building then that he has done enough to earn a second season as such, and to really give it a go, have a proper off season where he is the guy, and then see how it plays out next year, and they're going to decide from there?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think from what I understand, Levis was mostly a Carthon, Amy Adams Strunk decision. I don't think Vrabel necessarily wanted to trade up for a quarterback at that point of the draft. I think Vrabel was on board with CJ Stroud if that had been the option. And we've talked about that, I think, previously together. But that obviously didn't end up panning out for them. The Texans took him before they had the opportunity to possibly move up for him. So I think that was very much a Carthon pick with Levis. And I think Levis did show enough this year. And the overall numbers aren't eye-popping or spectacular or anything, but you got to also consider that he was working with, again, the worst offensive line in the league, a completely untenable left tackle situation, and a receiver room that, a 31-year-old DeAndre Hopkins was by far their best receiver last year. It wasn't like they surrounded him with the greatest opportunity to succeed right away. So I think he will get a chance to be the guy this year. I think, Callahan, Amy Adams Strunk, when she made her statement about firing Vrabel, the only player she mentioned in that statement was Will Levis. And I think the focus upon getting Brian Callahan in the building is see what you can, try to maximize what you can get out of Will Levis. And if he doesn't pan out, he doesn't pan out. You go and find another one. But I think they are going to go all in on trying to build something around Levis for 2024 and kind of see where the chips fall from there.
Yeah, it'll be certainly interesting to see. I mean, he's a fun player to watch. Yeah. I'm intrigued. I mean, he appears to kind of bring the attitude of both Josh Allen, Isaiah Pacheco to the way in which he puts his body on the line. So I am intrigued to see how that one plays out next year. Mike, for people again on this side of the Atlantic who want to check out more of your stuff, where can they do that?
Yeah, so all of my written work is at paulkoharski.com. You can also listen to our podcast, Football and Other F Words, which is available on any of your favorite podcast streaming apps of choice. But that's where you can find me. And then Mike Herndon, NFL, on Twitter or X, whatever you prefer to refer to it at this point.
Well, thank you as always for taking the time to chat to me, and be an interesting couple of weeks to see how Callahan fills out that coaching staff. But certainly life is rarely dull in Tennessee with the Titans. So thanks again.
Absolutely, yeah, we're never bored here.